Hello all and welcome to today's session on AI in banking, building compliant and safe enterprise AI at scale. This webinar will explore the importance of aligning AI to banking use cases, data management and governance. We've got a little bit of housekeeping before we dive into the discussion. Firstly, please do participate with sending us your questions for the speakers during the session on the right-hand side of your screen. Secondly, we've got 2 downloadable reports on fraud risk management and AI-powered banking services by Red Hat, so do please check them out. And thirdly, we've got 2 poll questions coming up, so please do share your thoughts with us. And finally, note that this session is recorded and will be available on demand on the Finextra website. Now that's out of the way, let's get to it. So joining me on today's session are some sharp and insightful speakers from Red Hat and Dwolla. We've got William. Hi, William. Tell us a little bit about where you're going to be coming from today.
Hi, Sharon. So William Caban, Product Manager on Generative AI, and I'm coming from the technology side.
Perfect. We've also got Dr. Richard. Hi, Richard.
Hello. My name is Richard Harmon. I'm based in London, and I head up our financial services business globally.
Perfect. And last but not least, we've got Skylar. Hi, Skylar.
Hello, Sharon, and hello to everyone tuning in. I'm Skylar Nesham. I'm the CTO at Dwolla. I'm really fired up today to talk about AI and Dwolla a little bit, and talk about how we're seeing these new tools elevate customer experience and pain points. So I'm excited to jump in and share. Let's get into it.
Exactly. I know I'm excited as well. So to kick things off and set the scene, Richard, how important are open source models in overcoming the challenges banks face regarding data security and compliance when adopting AI?
That's a loaded question, but let me start with sort of the natural starting point, which is around innovation, right? So what open source really provides is a community effort around AI or Gen AI, right? And so it's also freely available to everyone because it's open source. So, and community projects, Linux Foundation, for example, has over 1 million community projects globally. And we have millions and millions and millions of contributors across many, many projects. But in the Gen AI space, I think it's even more important because the open source world is also the academic world, where a lot of the innovations around Gen AI and other AI capabilities, that's where they tend to land in a significant way. And we see a lot of large tech firms that are building large language models and other things. They're now starting to make many of them open source. And our parent at Red Hat, IBM, has their Granite models, which they've completely open sourced, so it's freely available to anyone. So I think from a standpoint, that's one of the key benefits. It's really a global community that's innovating and driving acceleration and advancement in the AI space. The other thing is about transparency. Because it's open sourced, everything is available, visual, accessible. And I think transparency, particularly in the AI space, I'm in Europe and we have the EU AI Act that's now a law, but it officially comes in next year. And that will put constraints and restrictions and limitations on what's safe uses of AI and what's not safe, and what aspects of AI or Gen AI would be regulated. And one of those aspects of regulation is really around, transparency around the data, what data is being used, it's correctly accessed, all the other things. We'll get a long conversation with the three of us, but I think the challenges there, is particularly around transparency.
And William and Skylar, perhaps I'll start with you, William. What are your thoughts on, the open source models?
So one of the things that we can see with this new or latest evolution of the AI and the open source is that for the first time, everyone can really really benefit from that academia research within, let's say, within a quarter, literally, benefit that directly and start producing business value, which in the past, it was gated by how fast a company or organization was able to productize or bring that. So that part of from research to providing business value, that's unique on the open source AI world.
And Skylar?
Yeah, I think there's some other benefits of the open source world. One we're thinking about is sort of the transparency that comes from the open source world, right? That the open source models allow us to more carefully scrutinize the code that's behind these systems and how it works. Also potential to identify, vulnerabilities or security concerns. I think that on top of that, the community-driven approach, will help foster, as we kind of already talked about, more innovation and collaboration on these tools to help things move a little bit faster. Another benefit that businesses may see from open source models is reduction in vendor lock-in. So the open source model might allow you to sort of port your solutions between different cloud providers, different technology vendors over time. And just in general, I think that the open source models will help with compliance and regulation broadly, in the sense that it's going to give more insight to regulators and those who are trying to study these models and build regulation and understanding around them.
Well, before we dive into all the regulatory side of it, because I know we've got questions coming up, we've also got a poll question as well. So guys, please do tell us, where are you in your AI adoption journey? Are you exploring? Are you planning? Are you experimenting, implementing, scaling, or optimizing? Please let us know your thoughts. And I can already see some questions as well in the chat, so that's fantastic. Keep them coming and we'll get to them shortly. But whilst we wait on the answers, Skylar, can you share some examples of the ways generative AI brings business value, and how can it be differentiated from traditional AI?
Sure. So we're seeing that generative AI is bringing significant business value. And the way it's doing so is really through enabling the creation of new content. You could think of text or images, or maybe even code. And this capability is allowing businesses to really streamline and enhance customer service and add it into new innovative products and services. So, you might think of traditional AI as relying on existing data to make predictions about what's going to happen. And generative AI is about generating new content from data. I actually asked AI to kind of explain this all in layman's terms, and so that we could sort of what's an easy way to explain this? And the way it described it to me, which is fascinating, was traditional AI is kind of like your family pet, maybe your family dog, right? It knows how to do certain tricks, right? You can teach it how to sit, you can teach it how to stay, how to fetch, those things. And generative AI is like being able to teach your family dog how to play guitar. So it's teaching it a whole new set of creative skills that technology hasn't really had before. And we're seeing some different spaces where folks are adopting and applying it. So one space is enhancing the customer experience. As a real example, at Dwolla, we've built an LLM-powered developer tool. And this tool helps developers who are integrating with our platform by answering questions that they have about our developer documentation, maybe about how to interface with certain API endpoints and specific programming languages. And we've been really impressed by what Gen AI has been able to do. A couple examples, right? It answers support questions 24/7, where those experts in our AI in our APIs maybe can't do that. But something else that's really fascinating that we didn't even maybe necessarily even consider upfront is that it answers questions in different languages. So we've seen questions in Arabic, in Russian, in Spanish that happen, all the time in our before, where we would have to, spend a lot of time really dissecting and understanding how to answer those questions. Generative AI is able to do it just out of the box.
And Richard, do you agree?
Yeah, no, I agree. in financial services globally, there's probably two main areas that we see firms taking advantage, and I think Skylar, gave some great examples. And one of them, which ties in, is around operational efficiency, right? It simplifies a lot of complex processes in certain situations. I think it can really summarize documents, particularly the large language model side of Gen AI. And I think there's more gains in terms of coding. I think William will probably touch on a little what we're doing on the technology side with Red Hat, so I won't bring that up explicitly. But the efficiency aspect of the potential of making people more productive, sort of the part of our jobs, or many jobs that people don't really like, the manual stuff that's painful, repetitive. Gen AI is ideally suited to sort of tackle those things. And that not only makes people more productive, but then you're spending your time on things that are a little more of higher value and more, let's say, more enjoyable as well, hopefully. The other side is on the business side, dealing with customers. It's enabling, and Skylar's example was perfect, hyper-personalization in terms of interacting with customers. It could be corporate customers or regular retail customers. And we see a lot of those activities around chatbots being used. There's some great examples of chatbots, being in the call center, and they're listening to the agent interacting with the customer. And it's actually listening and responding and giving guidance and information to the agent. So the processing time, they're able to process almost 60% more calls, more responses with less errors. And also they can very quickly route them. If the agent doesn't have the right information or expertise, they know exactly where they can be routed to. So those kinds of examples, they're relatively easy to do, and human being is still deciding what information to use. So I wouldn't call it dangerous in any way. I think it'd be extremely helpful and valuable to firms that do that. The two areas, I come from a risk quantitative background. So the two areas I see some really huge opportunities is obviously in fraud, financial crime detection, money laundering, anti-money laundering. So around anomaly detection, not so much large language Gen AI, but around time series, foundation models. And I think that can be really transformative, sort of a different set of tools to identify anomaly detection. And it can also integrate beyond just textual information, time series data, but into semi-structured data. And then tied into that is also risk. The aspect of understanding what's moving markets or what's moving other things, has a real impact when you have a broad set of information. So bringing in news feeds, macroeconomic data, if we're trying to look at climate impacts, there's just tens of thousands of use cases in that space. So I think the potential for benefiting, financial services firms in all these areas is tremendous. But it's going to take a little time, obviously. So.
Oh, and whilst we're slowly losing Richard a little bit. So whilst we wait for him to come back, we do actually have the poll results. All right, so it's quite split. We have 29.2% of you who are planning, and we have 29.2% who are experimenting. Will, what do you think about the results? Do they surprise you? Please unpack them for us. William, are you with us?
Yeah. I'm here. You hear me? Hopefully. So I'm studying this real quick. This is kind of the exact pattern that we are seeing throughout not only the financial customer, but throughout the industry and all the customers that we get to interact with. And here's the thing, the tools today allow anyone to do a POC in pretty much no time. Now, the reality is that bringing those POC into production, that's where the pain really starts. And I remember last year, Gartner did a study, and at the end, over 76% of basically the blocker It's like no one can, I mean, in general, over 76%, bringing that from POC to production, it really takes over 7 months and actually over 25% more than a year. So that is kind of painting the same picture, let's say, that we are seeing.
All right, and we've also got a little bit of time as well to have one of these wonderful audience questions as well. Skylar, what will the impact be on jobs? Just don't say we can all become students, landscape gardeners, or artists, although I wouldn't mind being either of those. Skylar, what are your thoughts on the jobs?
I'm a technologist. So in general, the answer is always, it depends, and there's a lot we don't know. But what I would say is that the way I'm thinking about it, right, is that those who are embracing these new tools, learning about them, learning how to utilize them, learning how to apply them to their day-to-day operations and what they do, are positioning themselves really well for a future where we're going to see more and more AI tools in place. So, you know, let's take maybe something that's closer to me, coding, right? Writing code is something that Gen AI can do. But if you think about what a software engineer does every day, most of their job is not actually writing the code. Most of their job is thinking about the problem and the solution and helping the business figure out how to put machines and systems and technology together in order to solve problems and thinking creatively. A lot of their job is not necessarily the physical act of writing code. And so the way I think about it is, again, those who learn to embrace AI as part of their day-to-day responsibilities are really positioning themselves to go faster in the future with AI and work on more of the things that they love about their jobs and about their work life, and less about maybe some of the more tedious things.
Well, hopefully that will be all true. And Richard, with the efficiency and governance being key concerns for banks, how can synthetic data help to train models while balancing AI infrastructure with customer value?
Yeah, I think for those of you who've worked with synthetic data, you already know the benefits of it. But for those of you who might have not exposed to it, you know, synthetic data is basically data generated by algos or some sort of mathematical model, right? And the biggest use of synthetic data till today has been really around data privacy. So in essence, taking a digital copy of your customers, creating all the same characteristics, but stripping out, you know, the aspects of it that can identify an individual, right? Or even identify a transaction. Skylar's in the payment business; he knows that very well. So, the ultimate advantage of synthetic data is it allows you to share data. It allows you to take data maybe outside of a very secure environment and use it somewhere else for modeling purposes or analysis purpose. But it also allows different institutions to share data. And things like financial crime are really important because no one has the universe of financial crime activities. So the ability of sharing data in an example like that can be incredibly valuable for all the participants involved. And many countries now are looking to do some sort of sharing of that. The other advantage of synthetic data, and I'll just stick with financial crime or aspects of risk, you have very few instances, you know, like flash crashes. Fortunately, we only have a few examples globally on an every decade period. But let's say you're stress testing your risk systems. Well, you would want to see all kinds of things that are mini flash crashes or flash crashes. Synthetic data can generate those market activities and events, you know, that allow you to stress test your systems, stress test your portfolio, your risk models, and also your loss assumptions, as we saw in 2008 with the mortgage and housing market. So synthetic data goes beyond just replicating a digital twin of your data. It allows you to look at scenarios for simulation analysis that goes well beyond that, and you can, you know, do much more robust and interesting ways of addressing, you know, data that you can't have. The other problem with real data is it's expensive. Anyone who's been building LLMs, they'll tell you they're spending tens of millions, in some cases hundreds of millions of dollars to get access to the data. And the question is, do they have rights to all that data? But synthetic data is data, again, that doesn't have those restrictions. So you're able to scale instances of, let's say you have a market moves that you're looking at. Instead of looking at, say, 50 market moves that you might have as scenarios, you can look at 50 million market moves, right? And so it's that robustness to be able to scale data at very low cost, at great value to firms, gives you some unique capabilities. So all of this becomes ultimately synthetic data is a much more cost-effective way to train these large, sophisticated AI models. And I think that's why we're going to see a lot more use of synthetic data, for those reasons that I just highlighted.
If I may, I will add some additional value that sometimes we kind of don't realize is there, and is addressing biases. So in data science, we learn that any method we use will introduce biases in the data. And it's no different in banking or any other industry. So if we can use the synthetic data now to basically create normal distributions where biases are highly reduced, that's another way that synthetic data can solve a problem that we have by our own nature of how we collect information. So addressing bias is an important aspect that is addressed with synthetic data.
And Skylar, anything to add?
I think maybe there's another element similar to bias, maybe introducing data to help us manage and think about regulatory compliance, right? So tangential, I suppose, to bias is making sure that we can explain how our models are built and trained and show that we've used ways to provide the models with very diverse data sets. And synthetic data can help with that.
And Richard, before we hop onto the poll question, I can see you nodding away. Were there any final words on synthetic data?
Yeah, we have a partner and customer, a very close one called Swift, right? Skylar knows it very, very well. It's the messaging system globally for all payment transactions. And they have used extensively synthetic data to take sort of a copy of the data that's in their secure vault, where only a limited number of human beings ever go into the place. And they've been able to start to really innovate and develop new anomaly detection type algorithms off of that synthetic data. And eventually they have the potential of sharing that data with their cooperative institutions, which I think there are over 11,000 of them. So anyway, so that Skylar hit it right on those, the ability of being able to do things beyond the limitations of having real data really opens up a lot of activities that you couldn't do with real data. And I think that's where we're going to see probably an exponential use of synthetic data over the next 5 years.
Well, before we hop right into more on regulations, let's take a look at another poll question. Right, so are there any factors holding your company back from fully adopting AI-driven services? Is it regulatory compliance, data privacy, cost concerns, complexity of integration, risk of dependency, or ethical concerns? And let's actually talk about some of those regulations whilst we wait for those answers. Richard, how crucial are new regulations like the EU AI Act in light of the need for proper data and model management?
Ultimately, I think whether it's the EU AI Act is the ideal one, that's left to a debate as well as actual evidence. But I think it's really key because Skylar highlighted some examples, and William as well, where these things are incredibly powerful. They can mimic voices, they can do all kinds of other things as a real human being. So how do you decipher whether it's a real human being that might be committing fraud or criminal activity versus a real person? And so, and those machines have no ethics embedded in it, right? It's an algo that's being used for some, hopefully not nefarious purpose. And what that means is that the regulators, particularly, especially in FSI, financial services, is very attuned to potentials for manipulation, potential for criminal activity, also the potentials for concentration of risks, which could cause very severe market impacts, not just in an individual firm, but the whole financial system, right, globally or within a country. And so the part of things like the EU AI Act, it's really sort of focused on, identifying what's lawful, identifying what's ethical, and also what's robust. And by lawful, it's is this an activity that's proper to do? So it's immediately the EU Act identifies those things as being illegal. They can't be done, right? You can't. There's a whole range of illegal activities you can think of that criminals or potentially others might be trying to do. Ethical, and I think we talked a lot about this, and William highlighted bias. Ethical use of it, how it's being used, even if it's the correct information, if you're using it in a way that harms an individual relative to another person, that there's a lot of ethical conversations. And that's about fairness, it's about transparency, it's about accurateness. So all the things we want in our models, including, bias. And then robustness sort of goes about the ability of having it very secure. So you have security aspects around what data you can use, how you can use that data. You have to show the data lineage and ownership of it, that it's a valid set of data you've worked on. So all of this sort of puts some sort of guardrails around the use of AI, which I think is important. The balancing act that the EU AI Act is trying to do is providing those guardrails and sort of a safe environment for society, its citizens, and also the marketplace, at the same time to encourage innovation. So they're only worried about really aspects that will impact society as a whole or the marketplace. When it's non-impactful, there's very little restriction. So there's a lot of experimentation with algos and other things. So they're trying to take that balanced view of allowing a lot of activities to happen which do not appear today to be detrimental to society or customers, versus things that are potentially of risk of being abused, right? Mm-hmm. So I think the EU AI Act is a good example of the first global region that's trying to evaluate and do this, and I think it'll be interesting to see what other countries do as well.
And Skylar, I know that we're talking about the EU AI Act, and you're based in America, but do you think there'll be similar regulations coming in place soon, or what are your thoughts, basically?
Yeah, I think it's a super timely question, and just as we're seeing AI sort of explode, and for those watching and following along, it feels like things are constantly changing. I think we're from different aspects all over, like we're all trying to keep up on this, and regulation is in a similar state. But if I had to kind of guess what's going to happen in the US, I think, again, echoing what Richard said, there's going to be a focus on the risk situations, particularly those high risk applications that he talked about that could cause significant harm. So I see a ton of investment happening there. I think a thing that will be unique in the US is that we may see state level initiatives to regulate and manage and think about the way that AI is used, and introducing things that help with the bias and transparency that we've talked about. But overall, I see that, again, because the space is going so fast, there's going to be lots of collaboration across the world to sort of like find a harmonious set of things that will work together to really regulate and manage the use of this new technology.
And Richard, it looks like you're keen to dive in with some more input.
Yeah. Yes, Skylar hit it right on those. I spend a lot of time with central banks globally. And, the BIS, the Bank of International Settlements, which is sort of the central bank based in Switzerland, they're doing a lot of evaluation of different kinds of regulations. They're doing some incredible experimentation around using Gen AI for addressing climate measurements and ESG measurements. So there's, people should look at the research papers coming out of central banks in general and regulators. There's some really, really interesting use cases. But I think this cooperation, central banks are not competitive, right? They're very collaborative. They're also very well tied together. They don't always coordinate. They don't have the same regulations in countries or even in states in the US case. But different regions, and different regulators have different biases. I would, and I think Skylar hit it on the nose, while there's regulation, the US tends to be heavily focused on driving innovation, and that's been, true for 20, 30 years, Silicon Valley and all the other cases. That's why we have the largest tech firms to a large extent in the US. Other regions, are very, very cautious and restrictive. In Japan, most of the banks are not allowed to be in the cloud for mission critical applications. So it depends on the society, their appetite for risk, and also how rapidly things change. And so I think we're going to see a very diverse movement across the globe, which I think is actually exciting because, firms like Skylar's that's really innovating at the cutting edge in payments, they're going to have open doors in some countries and they're going to have a hard time getting into a few others. But that's good because it fits with what the economy is in a particular country. So.
All right, we're going to have a look at some of those results now. So regulatory compliance takes the majority with 40%, and then slowly down there, 41.2%. Wow, it's actually risen. And then it's 23.5% data privacy, and also 23.5% complexity of integration. So, it is a lead with regulatory compliance. William, does this shock you at all?
There's an aspect of it, which is the ethical concerns. I'm not seeing that as as being one of basically what's in people's mind on
0%.
Exactly. That's shocking because probably is because that's one of the aspects I look the most at, that and biases. Now on the regulatory side. So, and this might be, from the previous question and connecting to this, if there's any lawmaker out there, listen to this. So we need safeguards. So the regulation should be safeguard, but not based on fear, but based on understanding on how to foster innovation while allowing certain level of safetiness. And I think that this part of the regulatory compliance, and I know it's higher in other countries, it shows that sometimes bringing regulations without really understanding what's behind, instead of becoming a guardrail, it becomes an obstacle or a wall. So that balance, I think no one has probably figured it out yet, but that's as an industry we need to really work on getting the right balance such that regulatory and compliance does not become the bottleneck for everyone to innovate, but rather just, again, the avenue that is safe to follow to innovation.
And Skylar, anything to add? I know you were giggling away with the 0% on ethical concerns. What are your thoughts?
I think one thing that I worry about a little bit sometimes is whether folks sort of had their first interaction with artificial intelligence in the early days, right? Their first interaction was maybe with a ChatGPT or something like that. A lot of the news and things that they looked at initially was around hallucinations and AI getting things wrong, or maybe even you've seen something on LinkedIn where it gets a simple math equation wrong, right? Since that time, we talked about this being sort of like a 2-year journey, 18-month journey, going very fast. A lot has changed, and a lot of new tools have been introduced to improve these models. So if there's folks out there thinking, my first interaction around these tools, I was really worried about hallucination and about AI making silly mistakes. There's guardrails that have been put in place, to make the AI models respond better to our questions. We've learned so much about how to prompt them and get better answers out of them, how to prevent hallucinations. All of these things are sort of stacking up as initial problems that now there are tried and true solutions to. So make sure that, the audience and myself, we're all keeping up on these and watching these new tools unfold so that we're not sort of stuck in a vision of how things worked that have been solved since then.
I think following that as well. And there is actually an audience question that sort of talks about that a bit as well. So someone in the audience says, I feel slightly lost with AI. The only real AI tools I use are the language models, so your chat GPTs, etc. How can I implement AI into my life? And where is a good place to start? So as you were talking about that, Skylar, where do you think is a good place to start?
Yeah, it's hard for me to know that particular person's background or questions or what they're seeing. If you sort of think like, where's the end of this? What does this look like? I think that some of the models we're seeing unfold with agentic AI start to become some of the answer. And maybe just to sort of like a simple use case, right? Imagine that you have a gift that you want to purchase for a family member for the holidays, right? You want to assign an artificial intelligence agent to purchasing that gift. And so you say, hey, agent, here's your job. I want you to watch this website. I want to purchase this gift for my family. I only want to purchase it if it's below this price. I only want to purchase one, never make multiple purchases, all the safeguards that I just talked about. And when it hits, go ahead and make the purchase for me. That's an example of something that we can envision building with AI agents that could help people in their day-to-day lives. You can probably think of other automations and workflows inside of your business that you might configure for an AI agent as well, right? Imagine agents that can get access to your core systems and your core data and simplify bringing that data back, then having knowledge and understanding of your internal policies and procedures and helping advise you on next steps to take with internal challenges or issues, or helping point out areas of things you should watch or red flags that you should be concerned about. You can think of these sort of things that before you may need a very sophisticated software or programmer to help you build or create. Agentic AI is giving us tools where you'll be able to configure systems to do this for you. And I think it's really promising aspect of where AI is going.
And Richard, what about you? What do you think this person in the audience can do? What's a good place to start?
Well, first, I liked Skylar's example. I would take it one step further, and I'd like the agent to tell me what my wife likes best based upon analysis of what she wears and consumes, because that's usually where I get in trouble. So, yeah, just sort of a tongue-in-cheek example, but I think actually the open source community is a great place to look. Red Hat with IBM we have InstructLab, we have tools that are available for people to build their own models through the open source side in a very safe and relatively, I wouldn't say code-free, but relatively easy way to use the tools. William knows that much better than me because he's a data scientist, so he can go through it. But I think I would say just take your time, pick one little problem, one little small large language model. You don't have to deal with these jumbo language models, and work on customizing a problem that you have. Picking out a price or a gift for your wife is not a bad example to play around with without having to worry about too much about data and data privacy. So yeah, those are those things. And I think eventually as we move to agentic AI, as Skylar sort of just nicely moved into that topic. My background is also in agent-based model simulations, so it's all about agents. They're not Gen AI agents historically. They had other kinds of machine learning algorithms. And one of the things from sort of the agent space And what's going to eventually happen, we're a long ways away from it, is, the agents are not only sort of being sort of reactive to responding to humans' questions, but they're going to monitor systems, and they'll see things that have to be fixed, or they're going to write code, finish the code, check the code. And then the difference with agents is they'll do the actions, right? And that's where, Skylar and William are sort of salivating, because they can see real intelligent automation coming down the pipe. But obviously the regulator could be very nervous about that in some situations. So, but I think that the ability of not just responding and giving you information, but actually taking actions, through APIs and other ways of talking into other systems, I think those are really, really some interesting ways. Now that's much further down the road, and it'll take a long time to get into production. But that's sort of where the technology, as Skylar highlighted, how fast it is changing. It's faster than many of us can even keep track of. So.
And in keeping with the topic of agentic AI, William, what role can agentic AI or AI agents play in revolutionizing banking operations while ensuring compliance and safety?
Two things. First, on the customer-centric transformations, and the other is in the overall operational efficiency. So if we look at how we have done AI for decades in bank, it was a very specialized thing. So now it's accessible to everyone. So that also means we can add new things. Like, for example, AI agents that can adapt to the interactions with the individual and adapt that based on individual preference even, without going into the traditional demographic assumptions. So that type of very hyper-personalization of the experience with the customer, that's one of the areas that I believe it's really unlocked into its maximum potential with Gen AI. And even based on that uniqueness, since I have all the information about that customers, like providing guidance in a safe way, like, hey, yeah, like people, I would love to have something that tells me how to deal with my money correctly. So, and that type of which looks minimum value at the beginning, but it's what impact. On the operational side, what I see is, so there's this terms of improve the efficiency ratios, such that the processes can be optimized, are more intelligent, are more adaptive, better risk management. So things that already are being addressed with traditional AI, but now there are more capabilities that can be adapted and used in shorter amount of time. So and what I say is, instead of trying to look for a dramatic disruption, really with AI agents, we can deliver this continuous improvement, this in a way that really touch multiple points, and it directly impact the consumer or the customer experience in a way that they remain engaged with that organization. So that's where I see all this agentic AI really going and making Gen AI and traditional AI combine into providing an awesome experience, let's say, like a delightful experience for the user.
And Skylar and Richard, anything to add? I'll start with you, Skylar.
Kind of building off of William's point, I think that AI may be part of the answer to how we're going to more quickly adopt and build regulation into AI. And here's how. When we think about the way that regulation comes to us, it's through text. And it's a PDF and a long explanation of a new policy or a new guidance, and then updates to that policy and guidance over time. And so in the old world, we have to convert that into knowledge and then convert that into systems and code that's part of what we deliver to our customers. In the new world, our AI can interpret that text, and it can make changes and augmentations based on new regulation and guidance. So in a very interesting way, I think it can be part of what can speed up the whole ecosystem. And that's something that I think is a win-win-win for everyone. I'm excited about that.
What about you, Richard? Oh, I believe.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. I seem to be coming in and out every once in a while. I think I'll give sort of a similar positive example. We have a project that's going on with IBM Consulting and a couple customers that are looking at the an EU regulations called DORA. I won't get the Digital Operational Resiliency Act, but we're using Gen AI with a couple institutions to look and manage their controls, the control framework, right? So what does the regulation say, going exactly what Skylar, and then Gen AI evaluates the controls and sees what aspects are gaps potentially, right? So again, you'd have lawyers, you'd have analysts, you have all kinds of people doing this. If you can get Gen AI to actually do a first detailed pass and identify things, then the human beings can go and figure out, oh, okay, this is very complicated. The other side of it is, and I started my career at the Fed after my graduate studies and stuff, and having spent some time at the Fed and understanding risks, and I'm a financial services guy. The notion of agents being trading agents, and we have a partner that does this in ABM framework, agent-based modeling framework, but the agents, like human agents, can potentially commit crimes, insider trading, all kinds of collaborative, collusive activity, and there's a couple experiments going on in academia, but also among a couple institutions, of looking at the fact, can Gen AI agents potentially collude, through ways that human beings or regulators can't tell, right? Because they don't collude by voice or by email. They collude by patterns of some type, and then they can manipulate the market for profit because there's no ethics built into the algo, right? So that's obviously a very extreme and draconian case, but it's those kinds of things where you get to agentic AI and the really, really sophisticated agents, doing things that human beings might be doing to a certain extent. That's where the black line is for regulators, right? So where the guide rails have to be very, very strict. And so fantastic examples, but we still have to be considerate of the potential dangers for abuse.
Yeah, and we actually do have an audience question that targets that sort of area. So basically, they've boiled it down to, do you see the models for risk, fraud, etc., running in the cloud? And what are the implications for where the data should reside to optimize cost and speed? So I guess in keeping with that topic about risk and fraud, Richard, is there anything to add for them?
Yeah, I'll talk about the business side, and I'll let Skylar or William talk a little more about the technology side. On the business side, what Red Hat enables is for you to run your mission critical workloads anywhere, right? And you can move it around anywhere. It's portability, which is a key aspect of a hybrid architecture. But from a business perspective, there's significant advantages sometimes in the cloud in terms of agile compute, flexibility, access to GPUs. I'm not saying they're always cost effective, but there's some real powerful capabilities in the cloud. In the AI space, we're actually seeing more and more customers wanting to move them on-prem versus in the cloud. And I think that has to do more with around concerns about IP, data protection, because some of these large language algorithms, when you use them, that information gets absorbed. It becomes part of the next updates as it's learning, and that information then is accessible, outside of the institution. So there's a fair amount of concern about having confidential information leaking out of the institution or even customer data and other things. So, but I think the cloud for especially analytic use cases is a natural. That's where most of the workloads early on, when we had the sort of hybrid cloud architecture. So I expect them to continue to be major players. They're obviously huge investments they're making across the tools and capabilities, as is many tech firms. But I think that from a business side of it, it's going to have to be a balanced example, and it's also it's not just using tool, it's the culture about how you use it. You don't let the thing run for days and you get a massive bill from the cloud provider. It's different when you're on-prem. So those are cultural transformations, adoption, and with Gen AI, it's even more important that it's not just about using new tools, it's about educating people how to use the tools and how to use them properly. So, and then I'll let William and Skylar talk about, the cloud aspect from a technology perspective.
Yes, William, you go first.
Sure. So something that throughout my 30+ year career, but let's focus on the past 10 years, AI has never been one or the other. It's really depending on the use case, and even within the use case, certain aspect. Like, for example, training, it's probably just better just to offload that to cloud and inferencing local. So instead of the where, for me, it's more the how or when. Like, how is the AI used and when is the AI used? So yeah, it's not about cloud or no cloud. So basically, any solution you look for today, just make sure it works across, because you will find that even when you think that my use case is one or the other, you will find eventually you are gravitating. Now, in all this, there was another part of that question, which was about data. And that is one of the aspects that I love with the small language models. When we focus on SLMs, now we can take the data sovereignty that apply to a particular data set and basically create a model specific for it, such that the model can follow and be used within that data sovereignty policy that applied to that data set. And that is a unique aspect, and it has nothing to do with it in cloud or not. That aspect is the data basically drives how you can also train those models and how can you use those models, because you don't want to create a model with everything and then the model end up basically breaking the rules for how to use certain type of data, or leaking data from one team to another. So that's the other aspect, which I see is more relevant, specifically when we are talking about the data part.
Ms. Skylar?
I think there's been really solid advice here. And a lot of it, what I sort of, the way I see it fitting together is sort of grounding your AI explorations and your AI builds in first principles. So the question of, cloud first or on-prem is a question that we've had with other technologies and other solutions that have come out. And so what are sort of those grounding principles for you or your business that align with your journey and your plan? And I think I'd even kind of relate this all the way back to the question that we asked the audience, which is, where are you at on your AI journey? And, I think a common trend that I've been hearing a lot about is that people are in those early phases of their journey. And part of the challenge, I think, that's preventing people from getting from the early phases into the production phase or into the later phases is that we start with an experiment and trying a new technology without setting a goal that would help us decide whether or not, or what are the things that would help us decide to move this into the later phases of the journey. Again, it's a first principles thing, right? So in those early phases, in that beginning part of your journey, setting goals for your AI initiatives that help guide you. When should we move these things into the later phases and start putting these in front of our internal teams or customer teams to solve real problems?
And I've got time for one more question that I'll sort of try and amalgamate. So someone asks, where will AI play a role in payment processing, especially when banks are risk averse and have to follow so many rules and regulations to keep their systems safe and secure, whilst another person talks about cross-border financial services and having to keep up with your GDPRs, etc. So Richard, with your scholarly background before taking it to Skylar with the payment side, can you help us with the navigating the cross-border angle and the regulations?
Yeah, I mean, I think, for example, real-time payments cross-border is still a challenge with many countries. There's new approaches around blockchain and digital currencies and central bank digital currencies in particular, and SWIFT is running through a lot of different programs as well, and many countries are. So I think it's just a matter of time where certain standards are defined, and we'll have capabilities like that. But I would say, and Skylar's firm is a perfect example of it, these innovative fintech firms are pushing the boundary around innovation, where larger institutions, it doesn't really have the incentive or the capability because of the legacy environments they have. So the fintech firms are the ones that are at the cutting edge, providing new capabilities, new tools. So we see a lot of that, not just in payments, but in many other areas. And I think that's the secret of innovation, right? It's not just the biggest institutions in the world that's driving the innovation. It's actually the nimble, creative, smaller guys that become big, but they do really drive a lot of innovation. So anyway, but probably Skylar, being the payments expert on the call here, probably has a lot more to sort of highlight. Yeah.
Yeah, and just for background, our business is really focused on payments inside the US, right? But even in that ecosystem, kind of embedded in this question I'm looking at is a little bit of the answer, right? Because the ecosystem is complex. There's lots of different payment methods that you could use that are available at different times of the day, and you have different capabilities depending on which banks you're connected to and working with, and what kind of accounts that you have. On top of that, there's regulation. So imagine everyone having access to an AI that understood how it all fit together, and making it just as easy as saying, I want to pay my friend on Friday. I need to pay my bills at the last moment so I can manage my cash flow for myself and my family, right? And getting that help to figure out what are the, maybe not quite yet doing it for you, but eventually we're working toward doing it for you. But for today, what is the way, what are my options to manage this in my life easier, right? And I think that technology exists, and it's fascinating to watch that all unfold and how we can help people in their day-to-day lives.
And William, can you close us out? Do you have any final thoughts after everything that you've heard and seen as well from our audience?
First of all, do not try to really look for the next big thing, because here's the thing, it doesn't matter what is that next big thing, someone will copy it. And nowadays it's very, very, very easy to do so, okay? So tackle really customer pain points. Focus on customer pain points and internal pain points, and address those, and do it in an iterative way where that really can bring a sustainable AI innovation for your organization. So don't try to blow the ocean, as we say here. Just really hyper focus on solving that. And with all that, I want to bring something that for me is very important, is empathy. The empathy is important. So train the staff in how to collaborate with AI. Like, we really need our workforce, we really need everyone to be educated so that they can really benefit from Gen AI and how it can augment their job. So it's not only about technology. Let's don't forget the people.
Mm-hmm.
Wise words to close us out there. Well, thank you so much to our wonderful panelists, Richard, Skylar, and William. And thank you all as well for joining us. It's been such an amazing session. I know that I've learned so much, and I hope you guys have too. Well, thank you again. Take care and have a good day. Bye.
Thank you.